All right, so get this. Today's deep dive, um, a haunted house.
At least that's what these paranormal investigators on YouTube want us to think.
Right.
Yeah, we've got their video transcripts, so we're going behind the scenes, going to break it all down.
They're calling this place, like, the most terrifying location they've ever investigated.
Hmm.
But are they just hyping it up for clicks, or is there something actually eerie going on?
Well, I think what's interesting right off the bat is how they describe the house.
Yeah, how so?
They use all this language, horror-looking, random. They even go so far as to compare the layout to the design of a human mind.
Okay, so they're setting the scene.
Yeah, I mean, they are in the dark, obviously, hoping for a good scare.
Right.
So are they setting themselves up to see what they want to see?
Yeah, it's like they're laying the groundwork for their own ghost story, right?
Exactly. Like, think about classic horror movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Creepy music, shadowy figures, all building that suspense.
Yeah.
And these investigators are kind of doing the same thing. Maybe consciously, maybe not. It's hard to say.
And they even mention seeing, like, lights in the distance when they're first approaching the house.
Right.
Which, spoiler alert, turn out to be nothing.
Of course.
But in that moment, it totally adds to the creep factor.
Oh, absolutely. Like, think about how your senses get heightened when you're afraid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our brains are wired to interpret things in a way that keeps us safe. So in the dark,
Yeah.
alone, in a place that already has this spooky reputation,
Right.
even a harmless flicker of light can seem threatening.
It makes you wonder what we would hear if we were in their shoes.
Oh, for sure.
And they do start picking up some strange sounds, like scratching,
Mhm.
a muffled scream, a door latch, even what sounds like footsteps.
Now, this is where it starts to get interesting,
Okay.
because it's easy to jump to paranormal conclusions, especially in this kind of setting. But
Right.
could there be other explanations for these sounds?
Totally. Like an old house settling, could be some animals,
Exactly.
critters taking up residence, stuff like that.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But then they capture something on a locked-off camera,
Ooh.
and it's a distinct sound that they can't immediately explain.
Okay, that's a little creepy. And of course, they've got the whole, arsenal of ghost hunting gadgets with them.
Yeah, they've got the classics.
So let's talk about those. What are they working with here?
Okay, so they've got a key 2 meter,
Okay.
which is supposed to pick up on electromagnetic fields.
Right.
That might indicate, a presence.
Okay.
And then there's the RM pod,
Mm-hmm.
which supposedly reacts to changes in energy or movement.
Okay.
And, well, a cat ball.
A cat ball.
Yeah.
Seriously. Like the toy.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how often those pop up.
Really?
Yeah. The idea is that, spirits, especially playful ones, might interact with it.
Interesting.
But of course, how effective any of these tools actually are, well, let's just say there's a reason people are still debating it.
Yeah, fair enough. But even if the tools themselves aren't foolproof, they probably add to the atmosphere, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Like if you're holding something that's supposed to detect ghosts, you're going to be a little more on edge.
Oh, yeah.
Probably going to notice every little sound, every shadow.
There's a huge psychological component at play there. They might be more sensitive to subtle changes in the environment simply because they're expecting something to happen.
Right. Okay, so we've got the setting, we've got the sounds, the tech.
Mm-hmm.
But things take a turn when they hear what sounds like a gunshot.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a fight or flight moment.
It's a stark reminder that even when you're chasing the unknown, the real world, it can still come knocking.
And sometimes in terrifying ways.
Yeah. And it's really fascinating, actually, how their reactions to this supposed gunshot, it kind of reveals a lot about the psychology of fear.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, they try to rationalize it, right?
Right.
Like, could it be hunters? In the distance.
Yeah.
But you could just hear this doubt creeping into their voices as they're talking.
Yeah, because even if it was hunters, that's not great. Like, that means there are other people out there
Right.
in the dark,
Exactly.
potentially near this abandoned house. Not exactly comforting.
Not exactly. And I think it throws into really sharp relief, that line that they're walking
Yeah,
between curiosity and self-preservation, where
right.
they want that thrill of experiencing something paranormal, but they don't want to die.
Of course.
Or so they think.
Right, because they do end up going back inside,
They do.
which leads to what they describe as the most terrifying moment of the whole investigation.
Yeah.
So what happens?
So they're setting up for one of their cinematic shots.
Hold on. Back up for a sec.
Sure.
What do they mean by cinematic?
Oh, good catch. It's easy to forget, I think, that not everyone speaks fluent paranormal investigation. So basically, they're talking about how they're trying to use shadows, camera angles, maybe even special effects after they've shot the video
Okay.
to make things, more visually interesting,
Right.
to give it that kind of classic horror movie aesthetic.
Okay, so they're going for spooky vibes.
Yeah.
And then what? What do they hear?
Well, they don't really go into specifics in the transcript, just that it was a sound that sent chills down their spines,
Okay.
and it made them run out of the house.
Okay, so like what?
And remember, these are guys who spend a lot of time in dark, creepy places,
Right.
So for them to just bolt like that, whatever they heard must have been pretty unsettling.
It's like that moment in a scary movie when the characters hear something creepy and instead of like getting the heck out of there,
Yeah.
like, "Hello, is anyone there?"
Right.
And they're like yelling at the screen like, "Don't do it. Get out of the house."
Yes, exactly. It's that classic horror movie trope, but playing out, in real time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the irony, of course, is that they're the ones who are trying to create a cinematic experience.
Right.
And then reality, or at least, their perception of reality, delivers something way more terrifying than anything they could have come up with.
Wow. So they run out of the house. Did they see anything?
Yep.
Catch anything on camera?
That's the thing. They don't.
Mm.
They mention hearing some more sounds as they're running away,
Okay.
like footsteps behind them, a door slamming shut.
Okay.
But they even admit, that it could have just been their imaginations
Right.
running wild,
So it all comes down to what they heard, which, as we've already discussed, can be kind of tricky.
Absolutely.
Like, our ears can play tricks on us, especially when we're already on edge.
Especially. And this is where, having multiple sources of evidence is so important.
Right.
In any investigation, paranormal or otherwise,
Right.
if they'd caught something on camera, if they'd seen something, even just like a fleeting shadow or
Yeah.
some weird light anomaly,
Right.
it would lend a lot more weight to their claims.
Yeah.
But we just have their audio recordings and, their own accounts of what happened.
Which, don't get me wrong, those can be really compelling.
Oh, for sure.
But it also leaves the door open for doubt. Right?
Yeah,
So, like,
absolutely. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so interesting, I think.
yeah.
We're forced to really confront the limits of our own perception.
Mhm. Right.
How much of what we experience is shaped by what we expect to happen or, our fears, even just our desire for a good story.
It's like that saying, we see what we want to see, or I guess in this case, hear what we want to hear.
Exactly.
But then there's that nagging question in the back of your mind, like, what if they did hear something truly unexplainable?
Right.
What would that mean?
What would that mean for how we understand the world?
Ex-
And that's a question I think we're going to leave for you to ponder.
Okay.
Because as we go even further into these investigators' experience, we're going to encounter another interesting question.
Yeah.
What happens when fear overrides the pursuit of evidence?
So they're totally freaked out, but they decide to go back inside
They do.
for one more shot. Like, literally.
Right.
They want to get that cinematic feel in another part of the house.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So they're in the kitchen, setting up the camera, and they hear it again.
What? The sound?
A loud bang, yeah, like a gunshot.
Oh, wow.
But this time, it's definitely coming from inside the house.
Okay, so remember how they tried to explain away that first gunshot as maybe hunters outside?
Right.
They don't even have that anymore.
Yep.
They are trapped in this house with something that is making these crazy sounds.
And their reactions are totally different this time.
Yeah, how so?
They don't try to investigate. There's no rationalizing. It's just like pure fight or flight.
Yeah.
They grab their stuff and they get out of there.
You can, like, hear the fear in their voices in the audio, though,
Oh, yeah.
as they're running through the woods.
Yeah.
It's like they're convinced that whatever made that sound is right behind them.
Which, again, I think it speaks to the power of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
Like, they went into this investigation with a certain, level of expectation.
Right.
Maybe even excitement. But this experience, it pushed them past their comfort zone.
Totally. And this is where I think it's interesting to think about, like, the role of documentation in these situations.
Yeah.
Because they mentioned that, like, in their haste to escape, they didn't actually get any of those, cinematic shots. Like,
Right.
they were too busy living the horror movie
They were living it.
to film it.
Yeah, exactly.
But in a way, like, they captured something way more interesting.
I think so, yeah.
Just, like, raw, unfiltered fear.
right? Like genuine human terror.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the most compelling evidence of all.
Right.
It's not the blurry photos or the EVPs that could be anything.
Yeah.
It's those genuine reactions of people experiencing something they can't explain.
It makes you wonder, like, what if we stripped away all the gadgets, all the theatrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would we find that the most convincing evidence for the paranormal is actually just in those moments of, like, pure human terror?
It's those moments where our rational minds, they take a backseat to something a little more primal.
Right, those chill.
Yeah, the goosebumps, that
Yep.
sudden urge to, like, sleep with the lights on.
Exactly.
That's when things get really interesting.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this haunted house investigation,
Yeah.
here's a final thought for you, dear listener. The next time you're home alone at night and you hear a creak in the floorboards,
Or the wind rattles the window.
or maybe even like a toy mysteriously rolls across the floor.
Ask yourself, is it just your imagination?
Or could it be something more?
Until next time, keep an open mind.
And maybe a nightlight handy.